If you're listening to this, there's a really good chance that you're already intrigued by the idea of making your own natural skincare or hair care. But there might also be a part of you quietly wondering whether you're qualified to learn how. That fear is so common that I hear it almost daily. People always ask me, do I need to be a chemist to do this? And that doubt didn't come from you. It came from a beauty industry that has spent over a century convincing people that formulation is something mysterious and clinical and out of reach. So before we go any further on your journey into formulation, I want to dismantle that myth right away. And that's why today I'm joined by someone whose story is the perfect antidote to that fear. I'm going to be speaking with Formula Botanica's cosmetic scientist, Natalie. And what I love about Natalie's journey is that it mirrors the path that so many of our students take. She didn't begin with a lab coat or a degree or a scientific title. She went and got those much later, but instead she started at home, making products out of necessity and curiosity, and discovering piece by piece that formulation is a learnable craft and not a credential. And then she kept going with her passion, and it took her all the way into a lab, into formal study, and eventually it led to her role here at Formula Botanica. And that's exactly why I wanted Natalie to join me for this episode. Because her journey shows you what's possible when you stop believing the myths that the industry has built around itself, and you start believing in your own ability to learn and experiment. Natalie has lived every stage of the formulator's journey, from DIYer at home to formulation trainee in the lab, to scientists setting up development labs. And she knows firsthand that becoming a formulator isn't about having a certain background. It's about being curious and consistent and willing to start. So if you've ever told yourself that you can't become a formulator because you're not a chemist, or that you're not technical enough or scientific enough, well then, this conversation is for you. So let's get started. Welcome to Green Beauty Conversations, in which I challenge the beauty industry to become sustainable, champion independent and green beauty, and encourage you to join me in making beauty better. I'm your host, Lorraine Dallmeier. I'm a chartered environmentalist, biologist, and the CEO of award-winning online organic cosmetic formulation school, Formula Botanica. We have tens of thousands of students in over 190 countries around the world who study with us to become organic beauty formulators and entrepreneurs. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com to try our free online formulation course. And if you want to be the first person to know what's happening in green beauty, make sure you subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app. So in today's episode, I'm joined by Natalie Garwe, who is Formula Botanica's cosmetic scientist. Natalie's journey into formulation started long before she ever worked in a lab. As a teenager, she began formulating at home after her mother told her that she'd need to make her own products rather than buy mainstream options. And that early curiosity led her into university qualifications and into the wider cosmetics industry, where she went on to work for brands and suppliers, including Cosmico and Reckitt and Unilever and Brenntag, gaining experience from benchtop formulation all the way through to large-scale manufacturing and lab leadership. Today, Natalie is a core part of Formula Botanica's mission to teach the world to formulate, and she leads our in-house scientific quality control to ensure that everything we publish, from courses to blogs to videos, stands up to scientific scrutiny and meets our overarching formulation philosophy. Hi, Natalie. How are you doing today?
I am really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. And I'm so pleased you're on the podcast. This is lovely because now the rest of the world gets to know Natalie. And for everyone who hasn't met you before, I mean, people have mainly seen you in the Formula Botanica community, but could you please introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us more about you and your background and what you do here at Formula Botanica.
Sure. I'm excited to be on the podcast as well. So my name is Natalie. I am the cosmetic scientist here at Formula Botanica. I have previously worked in the industry for about 10 years now. I started off in a very, very small contract manufacturer, and then I went on to work for Unilever, Brenntag, Reckitt, and then I also studied pharmacology when I was at university, and I also completed the SCS diploma in cosmetic science.
Amazing. So Natalie is our cosmetic scientist, and she works on many of our blog posts and our videos and our courses and anything education related, because she is out there making sure that we bring that quality control to everything we do as well. And we appreciate you very much for it, Natalie.
Thank you.
So I guess the first place I want to start is, everyone's probably listening to your credentials going, oh my goodness, that's really impressive. But I want to take you all the way back to the first time you ever made a beauty product. What happened? What led you to that moment?
So I started making well, I didn't really consider them as beauty products. They were just stuff that I made. And that was like 13 or 14. And this was in my mom's kitchen. I wanted to buy lots of like stuff for my face and my hair and things. And my mom is a very natural woman. So she was like, no, no, we're not doing that. She would buy me the most basic things just for me to use. And I think that was the correct way. But then I was like, no, I'm going to make my own stuff and all of this. So then, and at that time, blogs were really coming into life and people were writing a lot of stuff and there was a lot of forums. So I started reading about making stuff at home. So the next thing was I was now mixing things in my mom's kitchen. One of the things that I did make for my hair was mixing mayonnaise and some oil. And no, there was logic to this. There was logic to this because on the blogs it said, the protein treatment and there's protein in mayonnaise because there's eggs in there. And it was if you add a little bit of olive oil, it's really good oils. So I was like, I am on this. So I made that. It smelled so bad in my hair. I was like, no, we're not doing that again. So I learned my lesson, but I remember it so well because it just kind of got me into this thing of like experimenting with things and also learning. I learned that eggs do have proteins in them. I did learn that olive oil is a very good oil. Mayonnaise is not a good idea for the hair, but I learned a lot. And then from then onwards, I started experimenting more and more with oils, butters. I kept reading the blogs, the forums. I started making much better butters and oils. And at that time, like blogs for like natural Afro hair were really like coming into life. And one of the things that they had on there was moisturizing your hair and then sealing, and you would seal with like an oil or a butter. So I was like, oh, I'm going to learn how to seal. At least I can buy, she was allowing me to buy moisturizers. So now I was like, I could seal. So then I started making a lot of butters. I remember when I first bought my first shea butter. So I couldn't really buy anything online because I was 13, 14. And there was like a vegan shop in Leeds. And I went to this vegan shop and they had shea butter. One of the things I really remember about that shop is that it smelled so strong. And I remember the shea butter, they had it in like in a plastic bag and then they put it in a brown bag and it was white. And when I saw that it was white, I remember that I read on the blogs that if it's white, it means that it's refined. And I just remember thinking, I'm actually learning something. And when I left that vegan shop, I didn't know that the smell was essential oils. I just thought, it smells really strong in here. But then again, later on, as I'm going through this, I learned that, oh, that smell, they were essential oils. And then that's how I made my first proper product when I mixed the shea butter with the oils. Then the plastic bag still smelled like the essential oils. So yeah. Cool.
Amazing. And what a fantastic place to start. What do you think encouraged your mother to sort of go, you're not buying those mainstream products, you're going to make your own? Like, I mean, that's quite a big thing to say to a teenager.
I think it's because my mom, she grew up like in the countryside. She grew up in a farm. So she was very much into eating healthy, into eating organic. Our food was organic. So the household was pretty much natural and organic. But I had friends at school that were buying eyeliners. They had all these fancy shampoos and conditioners, and I was wanting to do the same things as them. But I think in hindsight, the fact that my mom kind of encouraged me, she didn't encourage me to make stuff with stuff in her kitchen, but she let it slide. She was like, you know what, at least let her do the mayonnaise. So I think because she let me do that, it then kind of nurtured this hobby that eventually turned into an actual career. But I think it's just because of who she was. Yeah.
That's amazing. And for the record, I remember trying egg yolk in my hair as well. I didn't go down the mayonnaise route, but the eggs would definitely, it's not a fantastic experience.
No.
But we all come to it from different angles. I mean, the reason I came into formulation was because I had a baby and I looked at all the products I was putting on my baby and I was going, I have a biology degree and I even did chemistry at university and I don't know what I'm actually putting on my child here. And then I started to look into it and I discovered all these natural ingredients and I got really excited by what they could mean. And I mean, did you find that the more you went down this route, that the more excited you got by the ingredients as well? Yeah,
absolutely. I think the more you go down the route, the more you understand the ingredients, the more you're like, oh my goodness, this is what these things do. This is what an emulsifier is. This is what a surfactant. It just demystifies a lot of things about cosmetic products. And it also makes you realize some of the stuff that you're buying, they're really not that expensive to make. And you could actually probably make something that's better at home. So I think it really does lead you into like a rabbit hole of so many like exciting things, exciting smells, exciting ingredients. And I think one of the greatest things is that it does give you a good education into what works, what doesn't work, what's appropriate for skin, and what we shouldn't be using in skin and still use.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Once you went through all those experiments and you'd had inevitably a few, disasters and failures along the way, obviously learning that mayonnaise wasn't the answer to hair care. How did you feel once you did succeed at making your first formulation?
That was an exciting moment because I kept using, and I still use that butter today, that whole moisturize and seal method. I still do it. I still mix my own butters and my own oils. It became something that was empowering. And then my mom actually, she was like, your hair is actually looking really, really nice. She then got involved with the hair as well. She dyed my hair for me. And I had to learn how to look after dyed hair. So it was very exciting. It was empowering. And also it encouraged the rest of my family because they could see that, okay, this thing is actually working and she's coming up with stuff that actually works.
Did they ask you to make products for them as well?
Yes, that is the other thing. I was like, no, you guys, you didn't want to buy me anything. No, I did make some stuff for them. And they started asking me as well questions about, okay, so what's in this? Why do they put this in here? It became like a larger conversation. And also I would go to my cousins' houses and I would make stuff there. And they would be like, so you're just going to be mixing lip balms in my kitchen? I'm like, listen, it's a journey. We're going to take this together. So, hold on. And I remember it so well because she was like, you just in my kitchen. I'm trying to do cooking here. You're mixing lip balms. I'm like, they're good. They're really good. Just wait.
I love it. So what, you rock up at your cousin's kitchen with your ingredients? How does that work?
Yeah. So I have like a little box that I would take to her house because we lived like 2 streets away from each other. So she would be like, oh, do you want to come over for dinner? And I'll be like, oh, yeah, sure. It's a Saturday. So then I'll just take my ingredients and I'll be like, oh, by the way, I'm going to be making this. And then as we're having conversations, I would just be melting and mixing and adding this and adding that. And as much as she was like, okay, wow, but she was also interested because she'd be like, oh, okay, you've melted this. It smells like this. It looks like this. So yeah, so it was fun times for everybody.
I love that so much. I'm sure it was. I'm sure you inspired the whole family and everyone around the family. I mean, I remember when I made my first lip balm, I think I infused some chamomile flowers from my garden in some oil and I made them at home and I was like, oh my God, I made this. That felt so empowering and you feel so confident. And I've heard this over and over from our graduates as well. But while you were going through all this process and you were starting to, make formulations that you still use today, did you ever think to yourself, gosh, I need to be a chemist in order to be able to do this? Because this is a common fear that people have. And this is obviously the crux of today's podcast as well. Did you ever feel that way?
I think because I never thought of it as a career. It was just something that was in the background. So I wanted to be a neurologist. That was what I thought I was going to be. So I never thought that it was going to be a career. So I never looked into the credentials of what you needed. It was really something that I just did at home. But that question came in later on when I was at university and somebody said to me, you do know what you're doing. Like people do this as a career. And I was like, what? And he was a chemical engineer. He was like, yeah, people actually do this as a career. There are people who make these products and they're sold in the supermarkets. And then for some reason, I never put 2 and 2 together and thought that this was a career. But I think that's because it's not out there. It's not accessible. You don't know that like there's actually people in the background at L'Oreal who are making these products or at Unilever. There's like this wall or this gray area that you just don't know. And that's when I started thinking, oh, so do I need to be a chemist? Do I need to do this? I started thinking about the credentials and the accessibility of the whole thing. And I think that's when the doubt started creeping in because I had no idea how I could even make this into a career. But before, when it was a hobby, it was just a hobby.
I totally get it. And I guess a lot of people carry that with them. And that's also why we're releasing this podcast episode, because it's such a common question that we get asked. And it seems to be so incredibly internalized in how people feel. I get it all the time. I have a biology degree and people were like, you're not a chemist. I'm like, yeah, I know. But, you also don't go up to the dean of the London School of Economics and go, are you an economist?
Exactly, yeah.
But more than that, you don't have to be a chemist to formulate, do you?
No.
I guess let's demystify. What's a formulator? What's a chemist? Can you break it down for us?
So when you're formulating, you're basically creating different products. You're creating like your lotions in your home or your butters. And then when you're a chemist, this is when you go to study chemistry and you're kind of understanding like the compounds in our botanicals and things like that. It's like a deep dive into how world is made, essentially.
So when you were at university and you were studying pharmacology, right? And pharmaceutical sciences, where did they bring the cosmetic chemistry and was there any? Because from what I've heard, there really isn't all that much.
No, I don't even remember learning. There was nothing in pharmacology. There was no cosmetic chemistry. And I think this is where the doubt started coming in for me, because I was like, well, I can't even be a cosmetic chemist because there's nowhere for me to learn this. It was just biology and chemistry just straight on. And that was it. And you don't really learn about cosmetic chemistry. I only learned cosmetic chemistry formally when I did the diploma.
Yeah, I get it. I find it so interesting, though, that everyone sort of goes, you have to be a chemist in order to make cosmetics. But then there is hardly anywhere in the world where you can go and get a specific qualification in cosmetic chemistry. And almost everyone who works in cosmetic chemistry has initially studied pharmaceutical sciences or just straight industrial chemistry. And then they've bolted on an online diploma, not dissimilar to what we do here at Formula Botanica.
Yes.
And it's weird how we've wrapped ourselves up in this myth. Where do you think it's come from?
I think a lot of it has come from industry and some of the advertising that we see. A lot of the times when you see the products being advertised, it's people with lab coats, it's beakers, it's really nice, shiny pictures. Even when you see pictures of a manufacturing plant, it looks very pristine, very scientific. So you just internalize these images, even without anybody telling you. You kind of internalize that, like, oh, I need to be a chemist because this is what they're showing me you need to be if you're going to become this person. And the thing is that when you actually go behind the scenes and you speak to the people who formulate, a lot of us are not coming from this strong, I did a PhD in physical chemistry. None of us are coming from that. I remember one of my former managers, he literally came straight from school and then started working in the lab making shampoos. And then eventually he got an apprenticeship. But it was years and years of working in the lab and then adding on his qualifications. And then, so I think there is the marketing side where we see these lab coats, where we see the beakers, but then there's the behind the scenes where the people actually are. And I think it's also a shame because it's doing a disservice to the people who are actually behind the scenes and are working, because these are people with such interesting stories. They're inspiring. They have come from so many different backgrounds. And when you hear about how they got here, you're like, this is really inspiring. And it also speaks volumes of the products that they make, because that experience adds onto the shampoo that they're going to make. It adds onto the cream that they're going to make. So
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And for everyone listening, next week's episode, I'm going to go into beauty industry history and I'm going to break down exactly how it led to today's gatekeeping around chemistry, because it's a fascinating topic. And it still sort of permeates through the internet everywhere as well. There's lots of angry chemists out there who are sort of gatekeeping this, and I really don't understand what their issue is. But I mean, if someone's listening and they're thinking, I want to learn how to formulate, what level of chemistry do they actually need to know based on, everything that you've seen in your career?
If you're going to start, you just need the most basic, high school, at school, whatever it is that you have. I think the most important thing is not necessarily knowing the chemistry, just learning and experimenting. Buy the oils, mix them, see how they feel, see how they smell. Buy the shea butter. Go to the different events where you can see these different products, because I think there is something about doing something and actually learning while you're doing it, rather than just reading a book and understanding the theory behind it, which is a lot of the times what we get when we go to universities. We learn a lot of theory, but practically when you actually go into the lab, some of that theory does not even translate. You have to be in there, you have to experiment, you have to know what something smells like, you have to know what it feels like. We're making products that consumers are going to buy. So you need to make something that's just not theoretically possible, something that's actually going to feel nice, smell nice, people are going to be interested in the colors and all of this. So there is an experiential thing that's very important.
Did you find that you started to pick that up more once you entered industry? Because tell me more about what happened after you left university. You went for your first job. What were you doing?
Okay, so I think this also speaks volumes of the like variety of experiences and how people come into the industry. So when I left university, I was working in an admin job. I was not working in a lab. I was working for Capita, and I was thinking, how do I get into this industry? Because I've got no idea where to apply, what to do. As I said, this accessibility thing, you just don't know. And then a job ad came up, and it was for this small contract manufacturer that I mentioned. They were looking for an admin. And I thought, you know what, this is it. Let me apply. And I had a plan. My plan was that when I go there, I'm going to say that, yes, I want to work for admin. I'm going to go through the whole interview. And the last 2 minutes, I will tell them that, is it okay if I come into the lab just to see what you guys do? After I've done all my duties, I'm willing to work for free just so I can see what you do in the lab. That was my plan. So I did the interview, and then I got to the end and I was like, Mike, listen, I just have something that I would like to say. You don't have to consider it, but I have been formulating at home. I make stuff at home, and I just wondered if it's okay if I can come into your lab at the end of the day, or whenever you allow me to. I'll just work on some things with you for free. You don't have to pay me. He was so taken aback. He was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change the post for you. You can be a trainee cosmetic formulator. So he was like, let's do the formulations, and then we'll do the admin at the end of the day. So your job will be mainly to be in the lab. And then he trained me, and then that's how he trained me. And when we actually got into the lab, he was like, you're going to be very familiar with the things in the lab, because it was a very small contract manufacturer. A lot of our equipment were like pestle and mortars, some pots. We had some beakers. We had like pretty much kitchen equipment. We even had a bread maker that we used to mix liquids in. So he was like, you are going to feel very much at home. What you're doing at home is actually very good. It's just that we'll take it to a more professional level, like learning things like GMP, safety, and stuff like that. So he was like, you will feel very comfortable here. And I really was surprised. I was like, oh my goodness. So the stuff that I was doing at home actually translates into an actual job, into an actual product that we can sell. And we worked like with so many different brands, and I would be in the lab and I would be formulating, and they would be teaching me how to create things. Sometimes we would buy bases and just add oils, which is what I was doing at home when I was buying conditioners and just adding oils. And then I learned how to fill products with like literally a manual filling machine. So, and that's how I got started in the industry. It wasn't because I went to apply for a specific job as like a cosmetic scientist. It was literally admin, and I just kind of shot my shot.
Well, that was going to be my next question, actually. What skills did you learn by doing? So it sounds like the real sort of experimentation, the practical application, learning all about good manufacturing practice. I suppose no degree can really teach you that until you're in there doing it, right?
Yes. So the things that you probably will never learn at a degree when it comes to this industry is GMP. You're going to have to be in the lab to understand what is packaging, what's on a label, what do you need on a label, safety, how to fill a product, the different formats of the different products. You've got powders, you've got liquids, you've got really thick products, you've got all these things. Shampoos, you need to fill them in a particular way so you don't foam up stuff. So these are all practical things that you need to learn. And the thing is, when you're doing stuff at home, all of that translates into the lab, because when you're formulating at home, you're going to know that like, okay, coconut oil is solid, so we need to melt it. You're going to know that, okay, shea butter comes as refined and unrefined. You're going to know that some oils smell, some oils don't smell. You're going to know we've got these types of emulsifiers, surfactants, just because you've been experimenting. So these things are just going to come naturally to you, which is one of the comments that I got from one of my managers once I got to Records. He was like, this seems to just kind of come naturally to you. It's like you just get into the flow of doing things. But I realized that it's because in the background, all these years, I was just, playing around with things, getting a feel of things. So you just get this natural intuition of making stuff and knowing what works and stuff like that. You're not going to learn at university. You're only going to learn by doing.
I love that. And you're not going to learn that by being a chemist necessarily either. No. This is why our courses get you straight in there. You set up a small lab at home, which is not intimidating. You don't need much space. You don't have to spend much on equipment. I mean, you've already set this out in everything you've said so far. And then you just start ordering some ingredients, really basic ones to start with. You experiment with them. It inspires you. And I find that if you have a natural affinity with cooking, which many of our students often do, it does seem to come natural to them. Where do you think the link is between the cooking and the formulating?
I guess it's the fact that you are creating something from scratch and you've got these ingredients that you need to combine to make something beautiful. And with cooking, you're doing that to eat it. But with formulating for skincare products, you're doing that so you can use these things on the face. And there's an element of having to understand what is a chicken. And you need to understand what's a chicken. And then on the other hand, you need to understand what's shea butter. Okay, what's a herb? Okay, what's an emulsifier? So it's one of the same things, just different ingredients, literally just different ingredients, but it's the same process.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I've never heard anyone compare shea butter and chicken before on the podcast. It's a new one for me, but I like it. When did you transition from the stage of following other people's recipes? Because you were talking in the beginning about, you were reading all these blogs, you were finding advice online, you may have even bought some books. There are plenty of sort of DIY books, and there even were, a couple of decades ago. But when did you transition from following recipes to starting to sort of put together your own things?
I think once I made my first butter and it worked, that's when I started tweaking things. I started whipping the butters. I started melting them and leaving them, because it kind of gave me the confidence to say, okay, if this one has worked, why don't I change this? Why don't I add this essential oil? Why don't I change the color? It was very minimal changes, but it got me onto that journey of just doing my own thing and thinking. And this is where I ended up at my cousin's place with the ingredients, because I would be trying stuff. I'll be like, I've got this idea that I need to try, and it's Saturday, so let's do it. And that's how it kind of snowballed into that.
I love that. I love the idea of you just sort of rocking up at the front door. I've got my formulation box here. Let me in. Give me access to your kitchen so I can come and make some things for everyone. Some people might still be listening to this podcast and thinking, Natalie, you went to university and you got all these qualifications. Lorraine, you're a biologist. And they might be thinking, I failed science at school, or I didn't enjoy it. What would you say to someone who sat there going, I'm not a scientist, I can't do this?
I think that just because you failed at something doesn't mean that that's the end of the story. And I have a very good example of this. As I said, my former manager, he went straight from being at school into working, and he actually failed his GCSEs, but he managed to get this job into a lab, and he was just literally just following exactly what they needed him to do. And then eventually he went on to do his apprenticeship and do his education again. So I think failure, first of all, is not the end of your story. It's just the beginning of your story. And I think once you failed, just try again. You don't have to give up. Try another route. And we all fail at things. I failed at so many things. I didn't just, as I said, even my first job, I had to find a way, because I was failing at applying at other places. So I had to find a way. So don't be scared of failure. It's just part of the story. And also don't be scared of your story. Don't be scared to own up to your story, because it's really what's going to make a difference when you become a formulator. You're going to learn so many things that another person has not learned because they're not a part of your story.
That makes perfect sense. I suppose you could also argue that I remember my chemistry lessons at school. I took chemistry all the way through to my final exams at 18, and it didn't really motivate me hugely. I did it because I knew I wanted to get into science, and I knew I wanted to follow the biological sciences route. But we never ever made bath bombs or lip balms or shampoos. I think if my chemistry teacher, God, I can visualize him now, if he'd rocked up one day with his formulation kit and gone, right, everyone, we're making conditioners today, I think I might have sort of perked up a bit and gone, hey, this is my subject. But they also don't really bring that level of fun to the way that they teach this at school. So I'm not surprised that a lot of people probably look back at their school education and think, that didn't motivate me to get into this.
Not at all. And even as I think about my education, as much as I was making stuff in the kitchen, I was doing all this education, I was going to school, but it still never came together, because nobody in the education system told me that actually what you're doing at home is the same kind of concept that we're doing in the labs. You're experimenting, we're also experimenting. So I think you're very right to say that if someone did say, okay, let's make some bath bombs, it would be a lot more interesting. And people probably would fail less, would have less people failing.
And to the credit of the various societies in cosmetic chemistry around the world, they are trying to get into high schools to teach this as well, because I think they realize that is probably the hook to get more people into the industry. But you don't have to necessarily go down that route in order to formulate. So from where you're standing now, with all the experience that you've had, And also, what you've seen here at Formula Botanica so far, what genuinely do you think makes someone a really good formulator?
I think you need to be inquisitive and you need to be really interested in ingredients. I think the more you ask questions about what works, what doesn't work, the more you experiment and have hands-on experience of making the product, I think it will really make you a success. You don't have to have all the knowledge, you don't have to have all the chemistry, but inquisitiveness, asking lots of questions will get you all the answers that you feel like you don't have. And experimentation will get you the experience, the actual feel of the product and intuition.
So you've been at Formula Botanica for, I think it's about 9 months now. You've met lots of students and graduates in that time through various online sessions that you've done, but also in person, because we've been to events and we had our big global student meetup. How have you seen them apply that experimentation and forge forward without that chemistry background?
Especially when we had the global meetup, it was so interesting when they came with all their products and what they had tried. Yes, and what had worked. And I tried some of the butters and I could really see that like they just took this on and were forging forward and were making products. They were buying ingredients. They were asking lots of questions and they were not afraid to show that, okay, this is what I've made so far. Is it working? Do you guys like it? This is the color. Lots of conversation. I think that they really take it to heart. Like I could feel it that, they are really wanting to succeed and progress and they are trying things out, which is the most important thing, to just try things out. Yeah.
Absolutely. So a final question, what would you say to anyone who thinks that they can't formulate because they don't have that science background? And this is lovely because it's now coming from you with that science background.
You absolutely can formulate. A lot of us in the industry do not start off with all the scientific background. We come in green behind the ears and we get the training, we get the experimentation. So you don't have to have the chemistry background. You can just start with inquisitiveness and just experimenting at yourself at home and you'll be on your way.
Just like Natalie when she first started out with her little box of ingredients and equipment at home. And just like the 22,000 plus, students and graduates who've been through our courses already who start exactly that way too. And I think it often surprises them when all of a sudden they've made something with their own hands, they go, oh my goodness, I can formulate.
Yeah.
All this myth. It's almost like sort of internal imposter syndrome, isn't it?
Yes.
Where you're sort of going, I can't do this because there are all these lab coats and beakers in all the beauty industry adverts. And then all of a sudden it clicks. And we've got 2 members in our team. Their mother is currently going through our skincare diploma and she's turned, I think she's in her 60s or 70s. She's turned around and sort of gone, I'm never buying beauty products again. I had no idea I could do this. And I think that level of realization comes to everyone once they start to formulate.
It's very true.
So we really wanted this podcast to inspire you, the listener, to think, I can do this too, and to get rid of that imposter syndrome because you don't need to be a chemist to do this.
You don't. You can do it. Any
final words of wisdom, Natalie, before we wrap this one up?
Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to fail and own your story. It's your superpower and go ahead and buy those ingredients and start mixing.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been lovely having you here.
Thank you for having me. This has been so good and it's been so exciting. I'm glad to have spoken to you.
We'll have to do it again soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.
I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Why do you think everyone thinks you need to be a chemist in order to be able to formulate? Leave us a comment on our social channels as both the Formula Botanica team and I love hearing from you. And if you want to hear some more episodes about the topics we discussed today, there are so many, we've released over 300 now, please do go back into the podcast archives. Some great examples include episode 251, in which I interviewed Professor Stacey Cordery, who authored an amazing biography of one of the pioneers of modern beauty, Elizabeth Arden. And spoiler alert, she wasn't a chemist either. Or go and check out episode 129, in which I interviewed Professor Jeff Jones of Harvard Business School about the history of the beauty industry and all about the ways that the modern beauty industry took shape. He wrote an amazing book on this. It's still got pride of place on my bookshelf. And this is by far one of my favorite podcast episodes of all time because he was amazing. Or check out next week's episode, where I'll tell you all about how the beauty industry came to this world of gatekeeping around chemistry and formulation. This is a mind-blowing story and you need to hear it, so stay tuned for next week. There's a wealth of information in our old episodes and I do encourage you to go back and listen to them. So thank you for joining Natalie and I for this latest episode of Green Beauty Conversations. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do leave us a 5-star review so that other people can enjoy these conversations too. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever your favorite podcast app is, and stay tuned for the next episode. Follow Formula Botanica at Formula Botanica on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest, LinkedIn. We're everywhere. And come and give me a follow at Lorraine Dallmeier on Instagram and LinkedIn. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com and sign up for our free online formulation course today.